incarceration, homelessness, employment issues, or unemployment, really, income, voter disenfranchisement, rape and sexual assault, intimate partner violence and homicide, media representation, and there are more. Plenty. These are areas that Black men are actually in worse conditions than most other groups, including Black women. But we are not allowed to talk about it in the context of Black men. We're allowed to talk about it only in the context of Blackness, and only to the extent that it is something that can be transferable to the whole Black community to use, to advocate for resources or whatever else. But it's seldom directed just at Black men. Hell, I remember even in grad school, when we talked about incarceration, we talked about it as a Black issue. I never actually saw the number of Black men and women incarcerated until I had a doctorate and I was teaching. I couldn't find it because everything was related to the rates of arrest and all these obscure. Look, first time I actually saw $60,000, $65,000, 60,000 Black women incarcerated, and I think at that time it was upwards around 800,000 Black men. I was like, wait a minute. How exactly did this just become a Black issue? I don't hear that directed at other things. And y'all have seen me use this example. We talk about breast cancer in the Black community. Don't nobody qualify for men, and men can get it. We don't. Hell, we don't even talk about men and prostate cancer, and the numbers are higher than women with breast cancer. We don't even talk about prostate cancer. On gendered grounds, it is either what impacts women or we talk about what impacts the community. This is what I mean by flat Blackness. Other people use flat Blackness in other ways. I don't disagree with the way they use it. I'm qualifying for it in a race gender context. Flat Blackness in the Black community has tended to mean that on gendered grounds, we can only talk about women, girls, and LGBT. Heterosexual males are irrelevant, even when the subject matter overwhelmingly applies to them. We have no frame of reference for how it impacts them. We have the same cognitive dissonance we have when it comes to seeing male victimization. We don't know where to place it. So if we acknowledge it at all, it's on a lower level of attention, lower level of severity, lower level of importance. It doesn't qualify. So when I talk about Black male justice advocacy, what I'm saying to you is there are a number of categories, a number of issues that we have on the table that adversely apply to Black men more than other groups, even within our own community. And we need to be able to talk about it that way. We need to be able to talk about issues that impact Black males in a manner where we're overrepresented and actually not have to apologize for not including other groups, especially if they're not adversely impacted by it. Why is that a problem? But we've been shamed into doing this thing where, and no matter what the conversation, I see this with academics a lot, right? They'll present something, data of some sort, and they have to go out their way to find the balance with, say, women, girls, whatever, and they do it in a slightly disingenuous way. I saw a presentation once where a brother was talking about police-initiated homicide. Actually, I saw the same thing. Black Lives Matter did a commercial. They did the same thing. So they presented 4 men that were killed, and then they presented 4 women that were killed. Now, look, no disrespect to the families and the individuals that died at the hands of police or vigilantes across the board, regardless of gender or sexual orientation. No disrespect. All of that does need to be regarded, but we don't have to lose context to regard it. So disingenuously presenting 4 names of men and 4 names of women was ridiculous, because that's not the issue. Overwhelmingly, men die in these instances. Why is it a problem for me to say so? If 200 to 300 Black males are killed by police every year and 9 Black women are, why is it a problem when I point out this is something that adversely affects Black men? And how is it that academics are so shamed into this that we're afraid to say it, so we have to qualify it in these obscure little ways to not appear sexist? But it's not sexist to point out what's true. And you have no problem pointing out what's true for women and girls as long as the data applies. They are overwhelmingly. If you talk about breast cancer, going back to my example, Black women are overwhelmingly the recipients of it, or those who suffer from it. To deny that would be idiotic. I'm not going to hold a presentation on breast cancer and I'm going to say, look, these are the 3 men that died from it, and these are 3 women that. No. Black women disproportionately die from breast cancer compared to men. It's just a fact. Why is it a problem when we point out black men disproportionately die of prostate cancer over black women? Black women don't have a damn prostate. So that shouldn't be a problem to say if it's true. Why should it be a problem when we talk about incarceration or homelessness or unemployment? I mean, why? It shouldn't. So I'm creating a designation where we can. I am a black male justice advocate. I advocate for justice, not just men's rights, for justice for black men. Because our condition is not a few decades old. It is centuries old. The reality of what black men have been suffering from is much deeper than we thought. Hell, we don't even apply this retroactively in many instances. If you talk about slavery, for example, and this is one of the reasons when we talk about the black male political agenda that we created here on the Onyx Report, and I posted on my blog, right? A list of agenda items that black men, and I'm gonna pull it up for you guys while I'm talking. That's why one of the issues on there we talk about is a designation for reparations, particularly to black men. Why? Because we know historically, black women weren't even brought over here in large numbers until about 60 years before the Civil War. Well, that's interesting. I never learned that in class, not in high school, not in college. Nobody ever told me that. They presented it as something all black people suffered from. That was just it. It was something we all suffered from. Okay, hold on. All right. All right. So, in the black male political agenda, we list a series of political ideas, suggestions. I don't want to say suggestions, but basically ideas that black men have put forth about what kinds of policies they'd like to see, right? And it ranged from family court reform to, you name it, law enforcement. And there are subdivisions in each of those categories with specific ideas, right? Education, homelessness programs, right? Unemployment, right? Issues that are particularly or impact black men in a particular way. Intimate partner violence, but ways that are not regarded in the mainstream. Health, small business support, right? These are things that we don't have conversations about. And look, let me ask you, prior to this list, how many of you saw, take this off the screen for a minute, leading up to the election of what ended up becoming Joe Biden into the presidency, how many of you saw a list of political issues as they pertain to black men, written by black men, for black men, and presented to both parties to say, if you want our votes, black men's votes, these are the list of issues that black men have? How many of you have seen such a list in 2020? Don't worry, I'll wait. Now, I'm not going to say that there wasn't such a list ever. I ain't seen it until we wrote it. Appreciate the support, Reynolds. I'm just going to say I haven't seen it until we wrote it. Not to say one has never existed, but if it did exist, it was never popular. It was never mainstream. It was never even something disseminated amongst black men. No, we don't know how to do it. So even when Biden and Trump started actually circling the wagons and occasionally talking to black men, we didn't have any kind of framework to extend about black men's issues. We didn't know what to say. Even though we voted to the second highest numbers in the election, we tend to do, right? More than anybody for Democrats, except for black women. We're the second highest in the voting number, and we never even talk about why that is, right? Like voter disenfranchisement due to incarceration doesn't impact us disproportionately. We don't even talk about that. The idea is somehow black men don't support the Democrats enough. And then the argument goes even further, where we saw prior to the election that black men were somehow responsible for the failure of Joe Biden before the damn election even took place. And we were so irresponsible and childish. We needed to have strippers on poles to get us to vote. Word. But we're voting in the second highest numbers. Anyway, so that aside, right? We didn't have a list of political issues, priorities, things that needed to be done in order to court our votes. We didn't have one because we never learned to actually conceptualize ourselves as an entity. Black women have, especially since the 1970s. They can articulate their needs in regard to race, but they can also articulate their needs in regard to being Black women, Black girls, you name it, Black LGBT, Black lesbians. They can articulate their political interests in a very detailed fashion. In effect, they speak for Black men and for themselves. Leeways, appreciate the support. They can speak for Black men, they can speak for Black boys, they can speak for themselves, they can speak for gay Black men with a disability who can't, I mean, you name it. And we sit back and we allow it to happen as if we don't have a list of concerns that women themselves would not care to voice. Trust me when I tell you, this list, Black male political agenda, is not something that everybody wants to talk about, but most particularly feminists. And I didn't write it. I asked Black men who watched the Onyx Report to suggest ideas based on their own life experiences. And they did. Those are the Black men nobody wants to hear from. But they articulated concerns that are based on situations that mostly Black men share, contexts that we share. So what am I saying? I'm saying that we need to have a category in this space that takes what we're talking about and applies it politically, applies it in a manner that impacts our lives. But I'm not denying the impact of the personal, not at all. See, when I talked about new rules in the title of this presentation, what I meant by that is basically what you're seeing here with Black male justice advocacy is a requirement, is a demand for respect, but it's a demand for respect on political grounds. I am also arguing that we need to demand that in our personal grounds. Attorney Dennis Sperling said something when I interviewed him last on my show a couple weeks ago. He said something that stuck with me because it had been something I'd been doing, but I never said. And he put it so clearly. He says, I have a zero tolerance for disrespect, especially in relationships. I thought that was profound. I said, well, I think it's incredibly important that Black men learn to have a zero tolerance for disrespect in relationships, because that's not what we were taught. We were taught to prioritize women's worldviews, feelings, perspectives. Whatever she said, she has a right to say. Whatever you say that makes her uncomfortable, you're wrong about. That's what we learned. Again, being socialized by mostly women, we were taught these lessons, even just on a subconscious part, on their part. We were just taught these things because that's how they thought. That's how they saw the world. And we absorbed it. We learned it. We learned to prioritize their voices, feelings, thoughts, and concerns. We didn't even learn whether or not we had thoughts, concerns, feelings, and observations that could stand apart. Not going out my way to find things that stand apart from women and girls, but the reality is we haven't learned to talk about it. It's not how we've been socialized. So when we do so, it changes the discussion. A lot of people don't want to have that happen. So I'm saying, if these issues, that we're talking about, from incarceration to intimate partner violence, if we can require respect from the state, right? Whether we're talking about from philanthropists, from institutions, if we can require that from the law, if we can stand up here and say that Black men should not die arbitrarily at the hands of police because we're human beings, if we can say that to society, can we say that in our own individual lives? And see, to me, this is what Black male justice advocacy means. It means advocating for basic level freaking respect on an individual level and on a societal level, on an institutional level, on a cultural level, in every space that Black men find themselves at. Can we advocate for justice? Now, justice is at the larger end of it. I'm starting this discussion with basic respect. Can you require that, Black man, Black boy? If you're listening to this, can you require that your presence in people's spaces, your presence in their lives, has a cost? And the cost is at least respect. That's the beginning. Justice is the end point. The beginning point is respect. Can you withdraw yourself if you're in a space where you're not respected? Can you withdraw yourself from it? Do you have the testicular fortitude to do that? Can you? Can you require respect in your own space? Because you damn sure can't ask for justice if you can't even work on basic respect. But I am asking for justice. I'm asking, not society, I'm asking Black men. Can you stand a call for justice? But first, start that with your own stance for a call for damn respect. And to remove yourself from spaces where you're not. Or at the very least, set up a plan to remove yourself and set a timeline, damn it. But put yourself in a space where you don't have to. I have purged everyone from my life who cannot fathom respecting Black men. I got a 15-year-old son. If they don't respect me, they damn sure ain't gonna respect him. I will not allow anybody to disrespect me or my son. And I do this for him as much as I do it for myself. Can you? Can you require that of anybody in your space? Let alone somebody that wants you to protect and provide for them. This needs to be an agenda pushed across the board. Pushed across the board by Black men. It needs to happen. And if you can't, it's already a bigger problem in the situation than not. So that said, that's what I wanted to get across today. What I am pushing for at this point is a call for Black male justice advocacy, calling for Black males to stand up, to require respect, and to do so unapologetically. Unapologetically.